I think it's awesome that today's Good Friday and the theme of the day has been testimony. What a testimony is giving all the glory and the honor to God. And that's what he deserves on this day. It's one of the best ways to honor him. That's one of the best ways to praise him is from your testimony. I don't really know how this is going to go. Maybe really, really short. Could be 3 hours long. I began to study, and God gave me a question. And I felt like I wasn't supposed to really study much further on it, but just be led as a spirit by the Spirit when I got up here. It's a little bit outside of my comfort zone. I've really done anything like this before. I like to be prepared, like to have some notes. But see what God does, I guess. The question that I got was, if you could ask God for one thing and one thing only, what would it be? And I don't want you guys to answer out loud. I just want you to think about it for a minute. There's only one thing that you could ask God for. What would it be? We look at David and we see everything that he had gone through. And a lot of us can relate, especially with our testimonies. We can relate to the hard times that he went through the rebellious times that he went through. We can also relate to the times where it was good. We're like, oh man, this is awesome. God, I feel you right here. This is great. The word says that David was a man after God's own heart. And to me, that speaks volumes. I begin to think about that phrase, a man after God's own heart. And I begin to question. I'm like, well, why is that? Why was David considered a man after God's own heart? Because I look at him in the flesh and I'm thinking, he was filthy. Things that he did, sure, he had great seasons every now and again, and then he would go back to some not so great seasons. And I'm sure every single one of us in this room can relate. Some of us on a weekly basis. One day I feel great. I feel like God's walking right beside me every step of the way. And then the next day I feel like he's so far from me. And I'm not saying that to discourage you. I'm actually saying it to encourage you. But what made David a man after God's own heart? Psalms 27. I asked you the question at the beginning. If you could ask God for one thing, and one thing only, what would it be? And this is David's response. We'll go ahead and start at the beginning. It said, "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When the wicked, even my enemies and my foes, came upon me to eat up my flesh, they stumbled and fell. Though a host should encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. Though war should rise against me, in this will I be confident. So this one thing have I desired of the Lord, that will I seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord and to inquire his temple. And I got to thinking about that. And I see why he was named a man after God's own heart. Because the one thing that he asked God for was to be close to him. God, I want to have intimacy with you. I want to be as absolutely close to you as I possibly can. Some of you, when I asked you that question, might have been saying, you might have asked God for healing, physically, spiritually. You might have asked God for wisdom. You might have asked God for understanding of his word. But the reality is when you become close to God, all these other things will come into place. The word says, draw nigh to him and he will what? Draw nigh to us. It says, seek ye first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added. I was talking to Luke the other day, actually I think it was in one of our morning meetings, about how nowhere in the Bible does it say we go looking for happiness. I love this morning whoever said it, blessings are happies. That's what God does. He gives you a happy. But we're not to go seeking after happiness, after blessings. But when we become close to God, when we desire to be close to God, all these other things will begin to fall into place. And so I want to ask you, I guess, another question. Help me, Lord. How do you become close to God? What does that look like? What does John chapter 1, verse 1 say? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And it still is God. And it's alive, and it's powerful. And it says it's a sword piercing. You want to get close to God? I was going to point at my phone, but don't get in your phone. That's not how you get close to God. If you want to get close to God, you get in his word. Because that's how he speaks. Is through his word. A lot of times I think people, and I've been guilty of this a lot in the past, and I really hope you don't take this in the wrong way, but a lot of times people will go to teachings. They'll pull up a sermon. They'll pull up worship music. And then they say, I got my bread for the day. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. I'm not saying that God cannot speak through pastors and teachers and preachers and worship leaders. I'm not saying that at all. You can receive from that if you want to. But God speaks through his word. And when you hear a teaching, you either need to know what the word says about that, about what they're saying. You've already read the word for yourself, and what they're saying you can agree with. Or if it's new to you and you're like, oh man, that was good, I really needed that, then you go to the word to find the confirmation. You don't just take it to heart and take it to yourself and say, that was exactly what I needed. I hope it's right with what the Bible says. And I'm not saying that God can't speak through those people. But the word tells us that he speaks to us through his word. And that is how we get close to God, is through his word, through spending time with him. We can spend time with him in prayer. We can spend time with him in worship. But we can't leave out the word. We can't leave that part out because it's so powerful. Luke talked about Abraham and how, okay, I'm going to back up a little bit. God promised Abraham all kinds of blessings, all kinds of happies. Man, I really like that. I don't know why. I just love that. But he promised him all kinds of blessings. And I don't know if Abraham started to get a little bit weak in the faith at a moment, but he began to say, I'm not really seeing these blessings at the moment. And God says, Abraham, look up. So he looks up. He says, see all those stars in the sky? I'm going to bless you that much. Generations and generations and generations and generations. But he required something of him. He required his obedience. And Abraham got a little impatient. 10 years went by, and he didn't begin to start seeing the blessings like God had promised. So they kind of took matters into their own hands and ended up having relations with the slave and birthed Ishmael. And instead of waiting on God and drawing close to God, even when you don't see it, even when he didn't see it, he decided, well, God promised me this, and I'm not seeing it yet, but I'll just make it happen. And he delayed God's promise another 15 years because he decided to take matters into his own hands. And so some of us today might be delaying God's promises in our lives because instead of drawing close and realizing that everything we ever need comes from him and will be taken care of when we realize that he's all we need and that we need to draw close to him. Instead, we try to take matters into our own hands. We try to create our own Ishmael. And we delay the promises that God has for us. That's pretty much all I got on that subject. I do want to share a quick testimony with you, and then we can kind of go from there. But last night, after I got off of work, I had to run into town to get some gas because my truck is always on empty. That's just who I am. I'm pretty sure my light came on like a day and a half ago or something, and I mean, it's a wonder I didn't run out of gas before I got to the gas station, but so I had to go straight to the gas station, and all day yesterday I was riding around doing templates, just praying. And I kept asking God, I said, God, I need you to send somebody for me to minister to. This is what you've called me to do, and I want to be your servant. But I need you to send somebody. I need you to speak to me. I need you to show me. And I was looking for it all day. Finally, I got back to shop and I'm like, what in the world? Did I miss it? What's going on? And I kept thinking, did I miss it? Did I miss it? Was I supposed to say something to somebody? I don't know. So anyways, I went into town and I wasn't even really thinking about that anymore. My mind was on other things. And pull up to the gas station and I'm getting gas. And this bike pulls up to the pump in front of me up here. And then this SUV pulls in right beside me. And God said, I want you to go pay for that person's gas. So I walked over there. The guy got out of his SUV and I said, hey man, would you care if I filled your tank up with gas? He said, no, I don't care, but why are you doing this? And I said, well, I really feel like I'm supposed to. I feel like God told me I'm supposed to pay for your gas. And you could tell he started getting teary-eyed and he said, yeah, go ahead. And so I started filling up his tank and then I started talking to him, asking where he was from. And he said, well, my buddy is up in front of me on the bike. He said he's moving. I just helped him move. He said I had $10 in my account. And I just spent the last $10 that I had to fill up my vehicle so that I could help him move because all he has is that bike. And so he couldn't haul anything on the bike. So he said we were actually coming to the gas station so he could pull money out of the ATM to fill up my car with gas. And I almost broke down in tears right there, but I had to contain myself. And so I started talking to him, and he said, I just got out of prison not too long ago. He said, I live in Marion Woods. I'm trying to get my life back together. And he said, this really means a lot. He said, I've been in prison for a while. And he's like, I didn't realize that there were still good people out here. He's like, I just thought the world had gone to crap. And so before I left, finished filling his tank up. And I said, well, before I go, is there anything I can pray with you about? And he said, I just found out that I'm having a daughter. As soon as I got out of prison, he said, I met this girl and she got pregnant and we just found out that I'm having a girl. And he said, I want nothing more for that girl to be healthy, to have a good life. He's like, I want to be able to provide for my family. I want to be able to provide for my daughter. And I don't want her to live in, you know. And so I said a prayer with him there and just really tried to bless him and gave him a hug and a handshake and said, man, I'll be praying for you. And he said, well, it's exactly what I needed today. And I walked away with such a peace of knowing that God will provide when you seek him. Even when I thought that it was over with and done and I was ready to throw in the towel and I'm like, well, I guess I'm not going to minister to anybody today. God's timing is always perfect. It may be really weird to you, not normal to you, but it's always exactly on time. So don't hesitate to draw close to God. Because that's where the power comes from. That's where the healing comes from. That's where the miracles come from. When you're fully dependent, not self-relying, but asking God to continually guide your steps. I'm not saying I have it figured out, because I don't. Like I said, it changes. I just talked to Luke yesterday about how I was an emotional wreck. I mean, just this week for me has been crazy. I don't want to go into details, but just my mind, just my emotions, everything just. But something this week that I've realized, and I know it seems so simple and so stupid that, maybe you should have realized this a long time ago, Caleb. But when you draw close to him, he really, really, really will draw close to you. And that's a promise.